We had a comment on our Little Giant video from Garth O'Dowd, who said he would use Goliath for the character to fit the aesthetic. And we had reasons for using human for that character, but Goliath would have also been a good choice. In response, I answered that I felt that most of the material in Bigby's Giant was written with Goliath in mind, and that we would be making Goliath before we were through, and today is that day. Goliaths are the most giantish of the playable races. Furbolgs, which we'll be doing next, are also giant kin, but they are also associated with the Fae, and don't have the classic giant feel, at least in my opinion. On the other hand, everything about a Goliath is giant-like, other than their size, and they are the race I would choose if I wanted to roleplay as a giant. Hi everyone, and welcome to a Titanic episode of The Dungeon Crashers. I'm Guy.
And I'm Zapeel. Before we get started, please like our video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications as to not miss out on any of our exciting D&D content. We are continuing our series with Big B's Glory of the Giants, and we'll be using the giant foundling background again, this time the Frost Giant. As we said, we are using the Goliath race, and we are using the Monsters of the Multiverse version. Goliaths are medium-sized, but much larger than humans, standing between 7 and 8 feet tall. They are essentially little giants. They start play with proficiency with athletics, and it counts as one size larger for determining how much they can lift, carry, push, and drag. They are humanoid and have a movement speed of 30 feet. Their heritage makes them mountain-born. They have resistance to cold damage and are accumulated to high altitudes, even those above 20,000 feet. They also have stone endurance. When taking damage, they can use their reaction to roll a d12 and add their constitution modifier. They reduce the damage by that amount. They can use this reaction a number of times per long rest equal to their proficiency modifier. They speak common and one other language of their choice, and he speaks the primordial, which is the language spoken by creatures from the elemental plane. He has always been attuned to the elements, stone and air in particular, but fire and water speak to him as well. We are using the giant foundling background, and it gives the skills intimidation and survival. He speaks giant and one other language of her choice, and we chose dwarvish. It also gives him the strike of the giant's feet. When choosing this feat, he decides the type of giant that raised him, and that determines what the feat does. And he picks Frost Giant, giving him Frost Giant Strike. Once per turn, when he hits a target with a melee or thrown weapon attack, he can add 1d6 of frost damage to the attack, and if the target is a creature, it must make a constitution save or have its speed reduced to 0 until the start of his next turn. The DC for this save is 8 plus his proficiency and constitution modifiers. For ability scores, we are using the point buy system. Goliaths get the ability score bonuses common with the newer races of the Monsters of the Multiverse, which are 3 plus 1 bonuses that you can put anywhere you want, but no more than 2 on the same ability. We put a 15 on Strength, making it 16 with the first bonus point, a 13 on Dexterity, making it 14 with the second bonus point. He'll be wearing medium armor for the most of his career, and will need Dexterity even when he uses unarmored defense. We put a 15 on Constitution, making it 16 with the last bonus point. This is going to set the DC for a lot of his abilities. It will also eventually be good for unarmored defense, and he needs a big pile of hit points. We put an 8 on Intelligence. He was never given any sort of education and isn't particularly smart. We put a 10 on both Wisdom and Charisma. More of both would be better, but we don't have the points for it.
Our hero wasn't so much adopted by giants as he was enslaved by them. His clan has been enslaved by the Frost Giants for almost as long as there have been giants. Generations have labored thanklessly for the giants. What the giants didn't know was that the same elemental power that gave the giants their strength also empowered their Goliath slaves. Eventually, the slaves grew powerful enough to overthrow their masters and win their freedom. Our hero was just a young Goliath when the revolution came, but he fought like a seasoned warrior, wielding a giant's meat cleaver as if it were a huge axe. The earth power sustained him during his rage, protecting him from blows and giving strength to his arm. When the battle ended, most of the former slaves were content to remain in the Frost Giant's keep, making it their own, but our hero wanted nothing to do with the lands of his captivity, and taking nothing but his cleaver and a bag of food, he set out to find a new place in the world. His travels eventually led him to the land of the dwarves. The small creatures were much stronger than they appeared, and shared his connection to the power of stone. He lived among the dwarves for a time, learning their language and learning to use proper weapons and armor. In exchange for his labor, the dwarves gave him food and shelter, but also paid him in coin, both because he earned it and to let him know that they did not consider him a servant. And when he left, they sent him on his way with gifts: a suit of fine dwarf-forged scale mail, a proper great axe suited to his stature, a pair of throwing axes, and a bundle of steel-tipped javelins, which they had taught him to use. They also gave him a pack with food and other supplies that he would need for his travels, and advised him to travel south to the lands of the humans, but bid him to return when his wanderlust was satisfied. Our hero begins play as Barbarian, getting 2 skills from their list, and he takes Perception and Nature. He is proficient with simple and martial weapons, light and medium armor, as well as strength and constitution saves. He also gets Rage. He can enter a rage twice per long rest, and the rage lasts for a minute. It ends early if he falls unconscious or spends a turn without attacking or taking damage. While raging, he has advantage on strength saves and checks. He resists bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. When he hits with a melee attack using strength, he adds 2 to the damage of the attack. As he gains levels in Barbarian, the amount of times he can rage and the amount of extra damage he deals both increase. He also gets Unarmored Defense. When not wearing armor, he can calculate his armor class as 10 plus his dexterity and constitution modifiers, and he can use a shield while doing so. At 2nd level, he becomes a 1st level fighter, gaining a fighting style, and he takes thrown weapon fighting. This style lets him add +2 to the damage he deals with thrown weapons, and he can draw a weapon with the thrown property as part of the same action as throwing it. This will let him throw weapons without dropping his axe, and when he gets extra attack, he won't need to worry about drawing weapons to throw. He also gains Second Wind. Once per short or long rest, he can use a bonus action to heal 1d10 plus his fighter level. Combined with his resistance to common damage types and his stone's endurance, he's going to be very difficult to kill. At 3rd level, he becomes a 2nd level Barbarian, gaining Reckless Attack. When he makes his first attack of his turn, he can choose to attack recklessly. If he does, he gets advantage on all attacks he makes on that turn, but all enemies have advantage on attacks against him until the start of his next turn. This is almost always worth doing, but some enemies are easy to hit and it isn't necessary, and some enemies hit hard enough to make this risky. In the latter case, though, enemies that hit that hard will often hit even if they don't have advantage. He also gets Danger Sense. If he isn't blinded, deafened, or incapacitated, he has advantage on dexterity saves against things he can see.
Among the humans, he found himself far more accepted than he had anticipated. The humans were the most numerous peoples in the region, but their city was also home to all manner of beings. Elves and orcs lived side by side in relative peace. Dwarves plied their trade, and even the small folk, gnomes and halflings, walked the streets unbothered by their taller neighbors. His size did draw some stares, but no prejudice. He knew he would need to find work, as he only had a small supply of coins. He had a few skills with which to make a living. He had no desire to be a laborer, although he would do so at need, and he didn't like the idea of a life as a soldier or mercenary. At first, he did labor at the docks, loading and unloading the many merchant ships that passed through. In time, a man approached him with the offer to join the crew of a merchant ship. The captain was looking for strong men that could not only help sail the ship, but had skills at arms and could help repel pirates. The position paid better than working at the docks, and it offered him an opportunity to see more of the world, so he agreed. It didn't take long before he had to earn his keep. The ship was overtaken by a pirate vessel, and the pirate crew pulled alongside, using grapples to bind the ships together and rushing aboard. His javelins found the hearts of 2 pirates before the horde reached him, and his rage took control. He swung madly about him with his great axe, and as he did, the cold north wind spoke to him and offered him its power. Lightning blasted from his eyes, striking the invaders over and over. At 4th level, he becomes a 3rd level Barbarian, and he gains a primal path, and he takes the path of the Storm Herald. When he rages, he projects an aura of power in a 10-foot radius around himself. The aura has an effect that activates when he enters his rage, and he can use his bonus action to activate the effect again. When taking this path, he chooses an environment which can be desert, sea, or tundra, and our hero chooses sea. Each terrain has a different effect. He can choose a different terrain whenever he gains a level of Barbarian. The sea aura lets him choose a creature that he can see that is within the aura and deals 1d6 lightning damage to it if it fails a dexterity save with a DC of 8 plus proficiency and constitution modifiers. This damage increases to 2d6 at 10th level, 3d6 at 15th level, and 4d6 at 20th level. The Tundra aura gives him and anyone in the aura of his choice gained 2 temporary hit points. The hit points increase by 1 at 10th, 15th, and 20th level. The desert aura deals 2 fire damage to every creature in the aura other than himself. This includes his allies, so use caution. The damage increases by 1 at 10th, 15th, and 20th level. He also gets another rage at this level for a total of 3. At 5th level, he becomes a 4th level barbarian, getting an ability score improvement or a feat, and he takes the Fury of the Frost Giant feat. It allows him to increase his strength to 17. It also gives him resistance to cold damage, but he already has that, and it doesn't stack. He gets Frigid Retaliation. When a creature within 30 feet hits him with an attack roll and deals damage, he can use his reaction to retaliate with a blast of ice. The creature must make a Constitution save with a DC of 8 plus his proficiency and Constitution modifiers. If it fails, it takes 1d8 plus its proficiency bonus in cold damage and has its speed reduced to 0 until the end of its next turn. He can use this reaction a number of times per long rest equal to his proficiency modifier. At 6th level, he becomes a 5th level barbarian, gaining extra attack. Now when he takes the attack action, he can make 2 attacks instead of 1. He also gets fast movement. When not wearing heavy armor, his movement speed increases by 5 feet.
There were many battles on the voyage. The waters were home to many pirates and privateers. Those pirates that survived their attacks spread word of the ship's defenders, and that deterred some from attacking, but there were still many that would risk their lives for a chance at the merchant's cargo. The wind and sea grew warmer as the ship sailed south. They stopped at a few ports of call, and he experienced the strange lands he found. Finally, the ship reached its destination, a human city surrounded by lush fields and palm trees. But beyond the city, the land was dry and arid. The desert spoke to him, offering its power, and when he accepted, he was filled with the spirit of fire. At 7th level, he becomes a 6th level barbarian. Since he gained a level, he can change the terrain of his aura, and he chooses desert. He gains Storm Soul, giving his aura additional power. The desert aura gives him resistance to fire damage, and he doesn't suffer the effects of extreme heat. He can also touch an item that isn't being worn or carried by a creature and cause it to burst into flame. The Sea Aura gives resistance to lightning damage, gives him a swim speed of 30 feet, and lets him breathe underwater. The Tundra Aura gives him resistance to cold damage, and he doesn't suffer the effects of extreme cold. This ability is made redundant by his Goliath abilities. He can also touch an area of water and freeze a 5-foot cube of it as long as there isn't a creature within the 5-foot area. The ice melts in 1 minute. He also gets a 4th use of rage each long rest. At 8th level, he becomes a 2nd level fighter, gaining action surge. Once per short or long rest on his turn, he can take a second action, which he can use to take 2 attack actions, an attack action and a dodge action, or many other possibilities. At 9th level, he becomes a 3rd level fighter, gaining a martial archetype, and he becomes a battle master. He gets 4 superiority dice that he can use to perform maneuvers. He learns 3 maneuvers. The first is trip attack. He adds a superiority dice to the damage of the attack, and the target must make a strength save or be knocked prone. His second maneuver is quick toss. He can use a bonus action on his turn to throw a held or sheathed weapon that has the thrown property, and add the superiority dice to the damage. He can draw the weapon as part of the action. This would allow him to throw 3 javelins on his turn, or he could throw a hand axe and then charge into attack with his great axe. His third maneuver is menacing attack. He adds a superiority dice to the damage of the attack, and the target must make a wisdom save or be frightened of him until the end of his next turn. The save DC for his maneuvers is 8 plus his strength and proficiency modifiers. He also gets proficiency with an artisan's tool of his choice, and he takes navigator's tools. Technically, these aren't artisan's tools, but your DM probably won't care, but if they do, woodworking tools would also be something you might learn on board a ship. At 10th level, he becomes a 4th level fighter, getting an ability score improvement or feat, and he takes the slasher feat. This allows him to increase his strength to 18, and once per turn, when he hits an enemy with a slashing weapon, he can reduce the target's movement by 10 feet until the start of his next turn, and when he scores a critical hit with a slashing weapon, he grievously wounds it, and it has disadvantage on all of his attack rolls until the start of his next turn. At 11th level, he becomes a 7th level barbarian, gaining feral instinct. He has advantage on initiative checks, and if he is surprised, he can act normally as long as he enters a rage before taking any other actions.
Our hero felt the call of the desert strongly, so instead of returning to the ship, he remained in the city of the oasis and made plans to explore the desert. He found that it wasn't an easy proposition. He was told that there was little water to be found, and even with the desert spirits protecting him from the heat, he would still need water and food. It was also said that the desert was home to tribes of kobolds, huge scorpions, venomous snakes, and many other dangerous creatures. Despite these warnings, the desert called to him. He decided to forego wearing his armor, as it would make the travels more difficult. He purchased a strange riding beast called a camel that could carry many supplies and was said to be able to travel long distances with little food and water. He loaded the camel with wine, cheese, and dried meat, as well as his armor and a supply of extra javelins. He dressed himself in thin robes that the locals used to protect themselves from the sun and blowing sands, and set out into the desert. At 12th level, he becomes an 8th level barbarian, getting yet another ability score improvement or a feat, and he takes the Great Weapon Master feat. On his turn, when he critically hits a creature or reduces one to 0 hit points, he may make an additional melee attack as a bonus action. Also, before attacking with a heavy weapon, he can decide to subtract 5 from his attack roll and add a plus 10 to the damage. This is usually worth doing, especially since he can use Reckless Attack to attack with advantage. It might be wise to not use this against creatures with extremely high armor class, but in most cases the extra damage is worth the risk. At 13th level, he becomes a 9th level barbarian, getting Brutal Critical. When he scores a critical hit, he may roll an additional dice of the weapon's damage. His Great Axe deals a d12, so this can be very good. His damage bonus he gets while raging increases to plus 3. At 14th level, he becomes a 10th level barbarian, gaining Shielding Storm. All creatures of his choice within his aura gain the damage resistance that aura provides. He wasn't sure where the desert spirits were leading him, but he followed their lead. Finding water was difficult, but less so than the city people led him to believe, and he was able to stretch his supplies by filling empty wineskins with water and hunting for small snakes and lizards. The city folk had not exaggerated the danger. He was frequently set upon by scorpions the size of cattle, and once by a strange armored creature that burrowed up out of the sand beneath him. He handled these threats while avoiding major injury, but every such encounter slowed his progress, as he had to stop and tend to his wounds and heal. In time, he encountered the kobolds that the city people had warned him of. They were small creatures, but came in large numbers, and tried to overwhelm him, but to no avail. He laid about him with his axe, each swing killing one of the little reptiles, and before long they fled in terror. He waited a short while and then followed their trail. After several hours he came upon them again, or rather what was left of them. A group of figures dressed in similar fashion to himself were tending to the wounds and cleaning their weapons, clearly in the aftermath of the battle with the kobolds. Our hero approached the group, holding up his hands in a gesture of friendliness. One of the group approached him. It was a woman, but unlike any he had ever seen. Her skin was a deep brown, but her eyes and hair were the color of flame. She introduced herself, and after some introduction, she motioned for her companions to join her. Her companions were as unusual as she was. One was a reptilian humanoid, larger and fiercer looking than the kobolds. He was a lizard folk and was a druid of the land. The other was a small cat-like humanoid with spotted fur, and a pair of short swords hung at its belt. At his side was a great saber-toothed cat that seemed to be his pet or war beast. He found that the woman he first met was of the people called the Genasi. She was a descendant of the desert spirits called the Freed, and inherited their power over flame. She was a sorceress and a witch who had sworn a pact with a noble Freed in exchange for power. The group invited him to camp with them, and he gladly accepted. They told him that they were seeking a hidden canyon that was the home of a powerful blue dragon that had been causing great destruction in the lands to the east. The group had been hired to slay the beast, and they offered our hero a share of their payment and a share of any treasure that the dragon might have if he would join him on their quest. Not one to believe in coincidence, he thought that this must be the desert spirits were leading him, so he agreed.
At 15th level, he becomes an 11th level barbarian, getting Relentless Rage. If he would drop to 0 hit points while raging, he can instead make a DC 10 Constitution save to drop to 1 hit point. He can do this as many times as he wants, but the DC increases by 5 each time, so eventually he will be unable to succeed. The DC resets to 10 after he finishes a long rest. At 16th level, he becomes a 12th level barbarian, gaining an ability score improvement or feat, and he increases his constitution to 18, which will make his unarmored defense more effective, increase the DC of many of his abilities, and make him much more durable. He also gains a 5th use of rage. At 17th level, he becomes a 13th level barbarian, gaining a 2nd brutal critical dice. Now if he scores a critical hit with his axe, he rolls 2d12 additional damage. At 18th level, he becomes a 14th level barbarian and gains Raging Storm that gives additional power to his aura. The Desert Aura gives him the ability to use his reaction when hit by an attack to cause the attacker to make a dexterity save or take fire damage equal to half his barbarian level. If he's using the Sea Aura, when he hits a creature with an attack, he can force it to make a strength saving throw or be knocked prone. And if using the Tundra Aura, whenever the ability of the aura is activated, he can choose a creature in the aura and force it to make a strength saving throw or have its speed reduced to 0 until the start of his next turn. At 19th level, he becomes a 15th level barbarian, getting Persistent Rage. Now his rage only ends early if he falls unconscious or chooses to end it. And at 20th level, he gets a final ability score improvement or feat, and he increases his constitution to 20. Strength would also be a good choice, but we think constitution gives more value, improving his armor class, hit points, and the save DC of most of his abilities. Strength would make Great Weapon Master a little more reliable and increase the DC of his Battle Master maneuvers, so it does have some advantages. The band of adventurers found the canyon after much searching. The Tabaxi and his saber cat were better trackers than our hero and had little difficulty following the trails left by the kobolds. Entering the cavern, they were set upon by swarms of kobolds, many who wielded magic as well as weapons, but the Genasi sorceress and the lizardfolk druid laid many low with great blasts of fire, while our hero and the Tabaxi ranger killed many more with bow and javelins before engaging the rest in melee. After dispatching the kobolds, they continued to the end of the canyon, where they found a rare oasis, a large pool filled with water that flowed from a cave in the cliff wall. The heroes wasted only moments as they caught their breath and received healing from the druid, before charging into the cave in hopes of finding the dragon. They were not disappointed. The huge creature breathed a bolt of lightning at the heroes and rushed forward with fang and claw. The sorceress and druid cast spells attempting to bind and weaken the dragon. The ranger fired his bow with blistering speed, while our hero and the great cat rushed to battle the dragon head-on. We hope you enjoyed this character. We certainly did. This is a melee fighter that has a lot of utility. In addition to dealing great combat damage, it also has many ways to slow or stop an enemy's movement. It also has some ability to support its companions. It is strong at range when that is needed. The thrown weapon style combined with Strike of the Giants can be very effective. Of all of the giant foundling videos we have done, I think this is the most giant-like. While he doesn't grow huge or hurl boulders like the Path of the Giant build, he embodies the elemental power of giant kind, and he is incredibly tough, resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, as well as cold and possibly fire or lightning depending on his aura. He has second wind, relentless rage, and stone's endurance to keep him in a fight. He is lacking in magic and has to rely on party members for magical healing, area of effect damage, and battlefield control spells, and definitely works better in a party that can provide that. He's a powerful damage dealer and good at taking hits to protect his allies. Depending on his aura, he can support his allies or punish his enemies for attacking him. All in all, a well-rounded melee character with a lot of versatility. We also really like the party we made for him in the story, so we're including a little bonus art for them. They are a Tabaxi Scout Rogue Beastmaster Ranger, a Fire Genasi Pyromancer Sorcerer Afridi Warlock, and a Lizardfolk Land Druid. If you enjoyed this character, please tell us about it in the comments along with any questions, suggestions, or build ideas, and join us next time when we finish our series about Bigby's Glory of the Giants with a request from Sequana25, who wants a Firbolg Druid with an interesting backstory, and will be using the Cloud Giant Foundling. Until then, cheers!